The red dust of the Australian outback clung to Jackson Reed's weathered boots as he approached the twisted wreckage half buried in the ancient riverbed. 3 days had passed since the meteorite tore what the locals insisted was a meteorite had carved a burning scar across the desert sky before crashing into the remote wilderness. The government had cordoned off the area within hours, but Jackson knew these forgotten corners of the continent better than any bureaucrat with a clipboard. At 34, Jackson had spent the last decade making his living as a salvage hunter, tracking down everything from crashed aircraft to abandoned mining equipment across the vast Australian interior. His engineering background from his brief military service helped him identify valuable components others might overlook, but this was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. The metallic hull, if it could be called that, seemed to shimmer with an inner light that defied the harsh afternoon sun. Strange geometric patterns covered its surface, patterns that made his eyes water if he stared too long. The craft was roughly cylindrical, about the size of a small yacht, but its proportions felt wrong somehow, as if it had been designed by minds that understood physics differently than human engineers. Jackson circled the wreckage, his trained eye cataloging details. No scorch marks from atmospheric entry, no signs of explosion or structural failure. Whatever had brought this vessel down, it hadn't been a crash in any conventional sense. The craft appeared to have simply stopped, embedding itself in the earth with surgical precision. He pulled out his tablet, snapping photographs from every angle. The metal, if it was metal, reflected light in ways that shouldn't be possible. His camera's flash seemed to sink into the surface rather than bounce back, creating an effect like photographing the surface of a deep, still pond. "What the hell are you made of?" he muttered, running his fingers along the hull's edge. The moment his skin made contact, something extraordinary happened. The intricate tribal tattoos covering his arms and chest ink he'd gotten during his years stationed in Papua New Guinea began to glow with a soft blue radiance. The sensation was electric, not painful but intensely alive, as if every nerve ending in his body had suddenly awakened. Jackson jerked his hand back, heart hammering. The glow faded immediately, leaving him staring at his now normal tattoos in bewilderment. The traditional patterns his Melanesian friends had insisted represented his true spirit looked unchanged, but he could swear they still tingled with residual energy. Impossible. He breathed, reaching out again more cautiously. The moment his palm touched the hull, the tattoos flared to life once more. This time, he didn't pull away. The warmth spread through his body, not burning but embracing, like stepping into perfect sunlight after a long, cold night. The geometric patterns on the ship's surface began to pulse in rhythm with his own markings, creating a synchronized light show that painted the desert in shades of blue and silver. A seam appeared in the hull where none had been visible before, not a crack or a break, but a precise outline that traced itself across the metal with deliberate intent. Jackson could feel the ship responding to his presence, recognizing something in him that he didn't understand himself. The seam widened, revealing what was unmistakably a door. The edges were smooth, organic in their curves, as if the ship had grown the opening rather than manufactured it. Beyond the threshold, soft light beckoned, accompanied by a sound like distant music, harmonious tones that seemed to resonate in his bones. Jackson had spent his adult life taking calculated risks, but this felt different. This felt like standing at the edge of a precipice that dropped not into empty space, but into an entirely different universe. Every instinct screamed at him to walk away, to report the find to the authorities and let someone else deal with the implications. Instead, he stepped forward. The interior defied the craft's external dimensions. The space was larger than should have been possible, with walls that curved away into shadows that seemed deeper than mere darkness. Bioluminescent strips ran along the ceiling, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The air was clean and fresh, carrying scents of ozone and something floral that reminded him of jasmine. His tattoos blazed brighter as he moved deeper into the ship. Panels and surfaces that had appeared dark and lifeless began to activate at his approach. Holographic displays materialized in midair, showing star charts and data streams in languages that hurt to look at directly. The ship was coming alive. Around him, systems awakening after what felt like eons of dormancy. "Welcome," a voice said, speaking from everywhere and nowhere at once. The words were in English, but Jackson could sense layers of meaning beneath the surface, as if the language itself was being translated in real time. "You have finally come." Jackson spun, searching for the source of the voice. "Who's there? Show yourself." "I am the ship," the voice replied. And suddenly Jackson understood that the entire vessel was alive in ways that transcended human definitions of consciousness. "I am the keeper of memories, the guardian of promises made long ago, and you, Jackson Reed, are the key we have waited centuries to find." The tattoos on his skin pulsed brighter, and in their light, Jackson saw his reflection in the ship's polished surfaces. But it wasn't quite his reflection. The patterns on his skin were moving, shifting, revealing deeper layers of meaning that spoke of star maps and genetic codes, of bloodlines that stretched across the galaxy and promises made between species, separated by vast distances in time. "This is impossible," he whispered, but even as he spoke, he knew it was true. The dreams he'd been having since childhood, dreams of alien skies and impossible geometries, suddenly made perfect sense. The inexplicable pull he'd felt toward the crash site, the way his tattoos had always seemed to shift and change when he wasn't looking directly at them. "Nothing is impossible," the ship replied gently. "You carry the blood of two worlds, Jackson Reed. Your mother's human heritage, yes, but also your father's legacy, a heritage that traces back to the stars themselves. You are the bridge between worlds, the key to unlocking a future that both species desperately need." The ship's systems continued to activate around him, and Jackson felt a profound sense of homecoming wash over him. This wasn't just a first contact scenario, this was a reunion, a coming home to a part of himself he'd never known existed. But as the ship's lights grew brighter and more complex patterns began to emerge on the walls, Jackson realized his rival had set something in motion, something that would change not just his life, but the fate of two worlds, hanging in the balance between love and war, between understanding and destruction. The real journey was just beginning. The ship's interior shifted around Jackson like a living thing, walls flowing and reforming as if responding to his very thoughts. The bioluminescent strips along the ceiling pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, creating an intimate connection between man and machine that transcended anything he'd experienced in his years as an engineer. "You're frightened," the ship observed, its voice now carrying undertones of something unmistakably feminine. "That's understandable. The awakening process is overwhelming for most hybrid offspring." "Hybrid?" Jackson's voice cracked slightly. He pressed his palm against a nearby panel, watching as his tattoos flared brighter in response. "What do you mean, hybrid?" Instead of answering directly, the ship began to change around him. The walls became transparent, revealing the vast complexity of systems within, not mechanical components, but something more organic, like neural networks made of light and energy. At the center of this web, a figure began to materialize. She appeared slowly, as if stepping through water into reality. Tall and graceful, with skin that held the same subtle luminescence as the ship's walls. Her hair cascaded in waves that seemed to contain actual starlight, and her eyes held depths that spoke of eons of patience and wisdom. She wore what appeared to be clothing, but it moved and shifted like liquid mercury, adapting to her form with fluid precision. "I am Zara Nix," she said, her voice now clearly emanating from the figure before him. "I am the consciousness that guides this vessel, the keeper of its memories and purposes. And you, Jackson Reed, are the answer to a prayer that has echoed across the galaxy for generations." Jackson found himself unable to look away from her. There was something ethereal about her beauty, but also deeply familiar, as if he'd been searching for her face his entire life without realizing it. "You're not human, no," Zara agreed, moving closer with steps that barely seemed to touch the floor. "I am Australian, from a star system your people call Vega, but you are both human and Australian, the first of your kind, born from a love that bridged the void between worlds." She gestured, and the air around them shimmered. Images began to appear, holographic memories that played out like scenes from a dream. Jackson saw a woman with kind eyes and flowing dark hair, unmistakably human. She stood beside a tall figure whose features echoed Jackson's own, but with the same luminescent quality that Zara possessed. "Your parents," Zara explained softly. "Eleanor Reed, a xenobiologist working on Australia's first deep space monitoring station, and Corin Thale, a scout from our advanced exploration fleet. They met when his ship suffered damage during a routine survey mission. She helped repair his vessel, and in the process, they discovered something neither species had thought possible." The images shifted, showing the couple in various scenarios sharing meals, walking through alien landscapes, their hands intertwined as they watched unfamiliar stars. The love between them was palpable, transcending the barriers of species and origin. "Love," Jackson whispered, his chest tightening with emotions he couldn't fully name. "The most powerful force in the universe," Zara confirmed. "It led to your creation, Jackson, the first child born of two worlds, carrying the genetic markers of both species. Your tattoos are not merely decorative, they are navigation charts, genetic codes, memory storage devices. They mark you as heir to technologies and knowledge that could reshape the future of both our peoples." Jackson touched his chest, feeling the warm pulse of the markings beneath his shirt. "But why? Why create me? Why bring me here?" Zara's expression grew somber. "Because both our worlds are in danger. The Australian homeworld faces extinction from a dying star. Earth faces threats from the cosmos that your species doesn't yet understand. The union of our people symbolized by you represents the only hope for survival." She stepped closer, and Jackson felt his pulse quicken. Her presence was intoxicating, filling him with a sense of completion he'd never experienced. "But the choice must be yours, Jackson. You can walk away, return to your life as a salvage hunter, pretend this never happened, or you can embrace your heritage and help me awaken the others, ships like this one, hidden across Earth for the past 30 years, each one waiting for the right genetic signature to activate them. Your signature." Zara extended her hand, and Jackson could see his own tattoos reflected in her luminescent skin. "Together, we can prepare both worlds for what's coming. Apart, we face certain destruction." The weight of responsibility settled on Jackson's shoulders like a physical thing. He thought of his simple life, his small apartment in Alice Springs, his routine of searching for salvage in the vast emptiness of the outback. It had been peaceful, predictable, safe. "What about my life here? My friends, my work?" "You would be giving up one life to save two worlds," Zara said gently. "But I won't lie to you, the path ahead is dangerous. There are those among both species who would see our union as a threat rather than a blessing. Human governments who would study you like a specimen. Australian factions who believe purity of blood is more important than survival." As if summoned by her words, the ship's sensors chimed with an alert. Zara's expression immediately shifted to one of concern. "We have company. 3 vehicles approaching from the east. Military configuration." Jackson moved to a viewport that materialized at his approach. In the distance, he could see dust clouds rising from the desert floor, black SUVs moving fast across the rough terrain. Government response teams. They must have detected the ship's activation. "Then we need to leave," Zara said, but Jackson shook his head. "No, if I run now, they'll never stop hunting me. And you said there are others, more ships, more people, who need to understand what's happening." He turned to face her fully, seeing his decision reflected in her starlight eyes. "I need to know more before I commit to anything, but I also need to know what happens between us, this connection I'm feeling. Is it real, or is it just some kind of alien programming?" Zara's expression softened, and for a moment, the otherworldly being disappeared, replaced by something achingly vulnerable. "The connection is real, Jackson. More real than anything I've experienced in my centuries of existence. But it's also complicated. I am bound to this ship, to this mission. I cannot be entirely my own person until the crisis is resolved." "Then we resolve it," Jackson said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. Together. The approaching vehicles were closer now, close enough to see armed figures preparing for what they clearly expected to be a hostile encounter. Jackson felt the ship's systems responding to his emotional state, defensive protocols activating. Without conscious command, "Can you take us somewhere safe?" he asked. "I can take us anywhere," Zara replied. But her tone carried a note of caution. "But running will only delay the inevitable. Eventually, we must face both worlds and convince them that cooperation is the only path forward." "Then let's start with the hardest part," Jackson decided. "Let's face them now, but on our terms." Zara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well. But understand, once we reveal ourselves, there's no going back. You will be forever changed from the human you were." "I stopped being just human the moment I touched the ship," Jackson replied. "Maybe I was never just human to begin with." As the government vehicles surrounded the crash site, Jackson felt the ship's systems integrating more deeply with his consciousness. His tattoos blazed with brilliant light, and for the first time in his life, he felt truly complete. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it with Zara at his side, carrying the hopes and fears of two worlds toward an uncertain but infinitely promising future. The real awakening was just beginning. The three black SUVs formed a tactical perimeter around the crash site, their occupants moving with military precision. Jackson watched through the ship's viewports as figures in tactical gear emerged, weapons drawn but not aimed. A careful balance between preparedness and diplomacy. "They're not here to destroy us," Jackson observed, noting the restraint in their approach. "They want answers." "Then perhaps we should give them some," said a new voice from behind them. Jackson spun around to find a woman standing in the ship's entrance, not materializing like Zara had, but simply there, as if she'd been waiting for the right moment to reveal herself. She was striking in an entirely different way from Zara's ethereal beauty. Where Zara was luminescent and otherworldly, this woman was earthy and grounded, with bronze skin that spoke of years under harsh suns and eyes the color of amber that seemed to hold secrets spanning decades. Kira Voss, the woman introduced herself, stepping fully into the ship's interior. "I've been waiting for you for a very long time." Jackson read. Zara's posture shifted subtly, a protective stance that spoke of territorial instincts. "You're not supposed to be here. The protocols assumed I would wait patiently while you played out your reunion," Kira interrupted, her gaze never leaving Jackson's face. "But I've been waiting 37 years for this moment. I think I've earned the right to be impatient." Jackson felt the ship's systems react to the tension between the two women, energy patterns shifting in response to their emotional states. His tattoos pulsed with increasing intensity, as if responding to some deeper conflict he didn't understand. "Who are you?" he asked, though something in her presence felt familiar, like a half-remembered dream. "I'm the one who's been protecting you your entire life," Kira replied, moving closer. "The one who ensured you survived childhood despite the genetic instabilities that should have killed you. The one who guided you to those specific tattoo artists in Papua New Guinea, who made sure you ended up in exactly the right place at exactly the right time." She gestured to the approaching vehicles outside. "I'm also the one who's been feeding carefully selected information to government agencies for decades, preparing them for this moment. Those soldiers out there, they're not here by accident. They're here because I told them to be." "You betrayed us," Zara said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's walls resonate dangerously. "I saved us," Kira corrected. "All of us, human and Australian alike." She turned to Jackson, her amber eyes intense. "Your ship-bound friend there has told you about the immediate crisis, the dying star, the cosmic threats, but she hasn't told you about the deeper problem, the reason why simply awakening the hidden ships won't be enough." Jackson looked between the two women, feeling like a prize in a contest he didn't understand. "What deeper problem?" "The Australian Council," Kira said bitterly. "They've been monitoring Earth for decades, waiting for the hybrid offspring to manifest. Some see you as the key to their survival. Others see you as an abomination that threatens their genetic purity. And a significant faction believes Earth should be cleansed before colonization begins." Cleansed, Jackson's blood ran cold. Kira speaks truth, though she presents it with unnecessary drama, Zara admitted reluctantly. "There are those among my people who view humanity as too primitive, too chaotic to coexist with. They would prefer to start fresh with an uninhabited world. But that's where you're wrong, Kira said, stepping closer to Jackson. The humans aren't as primitive as your people think. They've been developing technologies based on crashed Australian scout ships for generations. They know about the threat from space. And some of them, the ones approaching us right now, have been preparing for this moment. Their entire careers, as if summoned by her words, a voice echoed from outside the ship, amplified by megaphones. This is Agent Dante Cross, Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. We know you're conscious and aware. We're not here as enemies. We're here to talk. Department of Extraterrestrial Affairs. Jackson raised an eyebrow. That's a real thing. Created in 1987 after the third confirmed alien contact, Kira explained casually. Dante Cross has been its director for the past 12 years. He's also carrying genetic markers from a different Australian bloodline, one that's been dormant for 3 generations. Another hybrid. Zero looked genuinely surprised. Not a hybrid, Kira corrected. A throwback. His great-grandmother was full Australian, part of the original settlement expedition that crash-landed here in 1891. Most of their descendants have been fully human for generations, but occasionally the dormant genes express themselves. Jackson felt his worldview reshaping itself yet again. How many of us are there? Thousands, Kira said, scattered across the globe, most unaware of their heritage. But you're the first true hybrid, the first to carry an active genetic bridge between both species. That's why your awakening is so crucial. The ship's sensors chimed with another alert. More vehicles were approaching from multiple directions, but these moved with different energy signatures, not human military vehicles, but something else entirely. Australian pursuit craft, Zara identified, her expression growing tense. They've found us right on schedule, Kira said grimly. Both sides converging at once. The question is, Jackson Reed, which side are you going to choose? I'm not choosing sides, Jackson said firmly. I'm choosing solutions. He moved to the ship's communication array, his hands finding the controls with instinctive familiarity. His tattoos blazed as he opened channels to both the human forces and the approaching Australian vessels. This is Jackson Reed, he broadcasted. I'm addressing both human and Australian forces. You want to talk? Fine. But we do this properly. Everyone holsters their weapons. Everyone lands their ships. And we figure this out like civilized beings. Because the alternative is watching both our worlds burn while we argue about genetics and politics. Silence stretched across the desert. Then Dante Cross's voice came through the speakers. Agreed. Human forces are standing down. A moment later, a new voice joined the conversation, speaking in the musical tones of the Australian language, but with an edge of authority that needed no translation. The Australian fleet acknowledges the hybrid's request. We will parley. Well, Kira said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. That's the first time in recorded history that anyone's gotten both sides to agree on anything. It's a start, Jackson replied, though he could feel the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders as he prepared to step outside and face representatives of 2 worlds. He found himself caught between 2 very different women, one offering him cosmic purpose and infinite knowledge, the other promising grounded wisdom and protective devotion. The complicated dance of interspecies diplomacy was about to begin, and Jackson realized that matters of the heart might prove just as challenging as matters of galactic survival. But as he looked at both Zara and Kira, seeing the hope and fear reflected in their eyes, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he wouldn't face them alone. The question was whether love could truly bridge the gap between worlds, or whether the forces of fear and prejudice would tear apart everything they were trying to build. The recognition was complete. Now came the real test. The Australian desert had become an impromptu diplomatic venue unlike anything in recorded history. 3 distinct groups formed a rough triangle. Around the crash site, human military vehicles to the east, sleek Australian craft that seemed to float just above the ground to the west, and at the center, Jackson's awakened ship with its 3 unlikely occupants. Dante Cross emerged from the lead human vehicle, and Jackson was struck by how ordinary the man looked for someone who allegedly ran a department dealing with extraterrestrial affairs. Mid-40s, graying at the temples, wearing a simple black suit that looked more appropriate for a bank manager than first contact scenarios. But as he approached, Jackson could see something in his eyes, a depth of knowledge and carefully controlled power that spoke of years spent bridging impossible gaps. "Mr. Reed," Dante called out as he drew near, "I have to say, in 12 years of doing this job, I've never had anyone voluntarily call a three-way meeting between species. It's either remarkably brave or remarkably foolish, probably both," Jackson admitted, stepping down from the ship. His tattoos still glowed faintly, creating patterns of light that shifted across his skin. "But we need to talk before someone decides shooting is easier than negotiating." From the Australian vessels, 3 figures approached with a grace that made them seem to glide across the desert floor. Unlike Zara's warm luminescence, these beings carried themselves with an cold authority that spoke of long-held power. The leader, tall, imposing, with features that seemed carved from starlight itself, studied Jackson with undisguised fascination. "I am Regent Tice of the Australian High Council," the figure announced, their voice carrying harmonics that resonated. "In Jackson's bones, we have traveled far to witness the awakening of the bridge child. You are not what we expected. Sorry to disappoint," Jackson replied dryly. "On the contrary," Tice continued, "you exceed expectations in most troubling ways. The genetic readings we detect suggest capabilities far beyond what our projections indicated possible." Dante stepped closer, his hand resting casually near his sidearm. "And what exactly did your projections indicate?" "That the hybrid offspring would serve as a suitable interface between our species during the transition period." Another Australian answered, this one smaller, with features that spoke of scientific precision, "a biological translator to ease the integration process." "Integration?" Jackson felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert wind. "You make it sound like a corporate merger." "In essence, that is precisely what we propose," Tice said without apparent irony. "Earth's resources and strategic position, combined with Australian technology and knowledge, a union that benefits both species under Australian leadership, of course," Dante said, his tone carefully neutral. "Naturally, your species lacks the experience necessary for galactic citizenship." Kira chose that moment to emerge from the ship, her appearance causing immediate tension among the Australian delegation. "Funny," she said, her voice carrying across the desert, "that's exactly what you said about my parents' generation, right before you abandoned them here to die." The Australian scientist's expression shifted to something resembling surprise. "Kira Thalvos, we assumed you had perished decades ago." "Sorry to disappoint," she replied, echoing Jackson's earlier words, "though I did change my name." "Amazing how humans will accept you if you don't glow in the dark and speak in musical tones." "You're Australian?" Dante asked, his hand now definitely moving toward his weapon. "Half," Kira corrected. "My mother was human. My father was from the original settlement expedition, the one your government has been pretending never happened for the past century." Jackson felt the pieces clicking into place. The 1891 crash. That wasn't the first contact, that was attempted colonization. A small advance team, Tice confirmed. They were meant to establish a preliminary outpost when they failed to report. "We assumed the mission had failed entirely." "It failed because you sent them to a world you didn't understand with technology that couldn't adapt to local conditions," Kira said bitterly. "Half of them died in the first year. The survivors integrated with human society out of necessity, not choice." Zara finally emerged from the ship, her presence immediately commanding attention from both groups. "Which brings us to the current crisis," she said, her voice carrying an authority that matched Tice's. "The Australian homeworld will be uninhabitable within 5 solar cycles. Earth faces threats from the outer rim that will rive within 2. We can continue debating the failures of the past, or we can work together to ensure both species have a future." "And what exactly do you propose?" Dante asked. "Full disclosure," Jackson said, the words coming from some deep certainty he didn't fully understand. "No more secret departments, no more hidden agendas. Humanity gets the full truth about what's coming, and access to the technology needed to prepare for it. In exchange, Earth provides sanctuary for Australian refugees and a staging ground for joint defense efforts." Impossible, Tai said immediately. Human society lacks the stability for such revelations. There would be panic, chaos, potential collapse of your civilization. You'd be surprised what humans can handle when they're given the chance, Dante replied. We've been preparing for this conversation for decades. Public disclosure protocols, integration frameworks, contingency plans for every scenario we could imagine. Even this one? Kira gestured at the surreal tableau surrounding them. Especially this one, Dante said with a slight smile. Though I'll admit, having 3 different hybrid bloodlines represented in one conversation wasn't in the original. Projections. 3. Jackson looked between Dante and Kira. Agent Cross carries dormant Australian genetics from the 1891 settlement. Zara explained. Kira represents the second-generation survivors, and you are the first true hybrid, carrying active genetics from both species. Together, you represent every stage of human-Australian interaction over the past century and a half, which makes this conversation either the foundation for a new era of cooperation, Tice observed, or the catalyst for a war that will consume both worlds. The weight of that statement settled over the group like a physical thing. Jackson could feel the expectations, the fears, the hopes of countless beings resting on whatever decision emerged from this dessert meeting. Then we'd better get it right, he said finally, as if summoned by his words. Alarms began sounding from both human and Australian vessels. Dante's radio crackled to life. Agent Cross, we've got massive energy signatures appearing at the edge of the solar system. Whatever's coming, it's big, and it's not ours. Tice received a similar communication in flowing Australian tones, their expression growing grave. The Outer Rim forces have arrived ahead of schedule. We have perhaps 6 of your hours before they reach Earth. Then we stop talking and start acting, Jackson decided. Dante, how quickly can you get your people mobilized for a joint defense? Give me 4 hours and access to Australian defensive technologies. Tice, how many ships can you have combat ready in the same time frame? Our fleet is small but advanced. With human numerical support and your unique capabilities as a bridge being. My capabilities. Jackson felt his tattoos pulsing with increasing intensity. You can interface directly with both human and Australian technology, Zara explained urgently. Your genetic structure allows you to serve as a living conduit between our systems. With you coordinating the defense, we might actually have a chance. And if I refuse, then both worlds burn, Kira said simply, and this conversation becomes the last meaningful exchange between our species. Looking around at the faces surrounding him, human, Australian, and hybrid, Jackson realized the choice had already been made, not by him, but by every generation that had led to this moment. His parents' forbidden love, Kira's family's sacrifice, Dante's years of preparation, Zara's patient guardianship, all of it had been building toward this convergence. All right, he said, feeling the weight and wonder of destiny settling around him like a cloak. Let's save 2 worlds. As the various forces began mobilizing around him, Jackson caught sight of both Zara and Kira watching him with expressions that mixed professional respect with something deeper, more personal. The battle for survival was about to begin, but the battle for his heart and the future it represented would prove equally crucial. To everything that followed, the choice was made. Now came the consequences. 6 hours later, the desert had transformed into a command center that defied every protocol in both human and Australian military doctrine. Holographic displays projected from Australian technology flickered alongside human computer screens, creating a surreal blend of 2 civilizations' approaches to warfare. At the center of it all, Jackson stood connected to both systems simultaneously, his tattoos blazing with energy that pulsed in rhythm with the combined fleet's defensive grid. The enemy had emerged from the void between stars, vessels that seemed to devour light itself, their dark hulls absorbing sensor readings and visual contact with equal hunger. The Devourers, as Australian records called them, had been consuming worlds for millennia, leaving behind empty husks drifting in space, 67 vessels and counting. Dante reported from his position at the human tactical display. There, maintaining formation just beyond Mars orbit. but our deep space sensors indicate they're charging some kind of planetary bombardment system. Standard Devour protocol, Tice confirmed grimly. They will systematically strip away Earth's atmosphere and magnetic field before beginning surface consumption. The process takes approximately 18 hours once begun. Well, they're not getting the chance, Jackson declared, his consciousness split between human and Australian battle networks. Through the neural interface, he could feel every ship in their combined fleet, 43 human vessels, equipped with hastily integrated Australian shield generators, and 12 Australian craft enhanced with human weapons systems and tactical coordination protocols. Jackson, Zara's voice came through the ship's communication system. The integration is putting enormous strain on your nervous system. Your human physiology wasn't designed for this level of interface. I'm fine, he insisted, though he could feel the truth of her words in the burning sensation spreading through his body. The tattoos that had once been simple patterns were now complex circuit boards of living energy, each symbol processing thousands of calculations per second. No, you're not, Kira said, appearing at his side with a hypospray of something that glowed with soft blue light. Australian neural stabilizers adapted for hybrid physiology. I've been working on this formula for 30 years, hoping I'd never need to use it. You've been preparing for this specific scenario, Dante asked, looking up from his displays. I've been preparing for the day Jackson would have to choose between saving the worlds and saving himself, Kira replied, her amber eyes fixed on Jackson's face. The question is whether he'll let me help him survive the choice he's already made. Before Jackson could respond, the Devour fleet began moving. Their dark ships accelerated toward Earth with impossible speed, their formation spreading into an attack pattern that would envelop the planet. From multiple vectors, all units, this is Jackson Reed. He broadcast across both fleets. Remember, we're not trying to win a traditional battle. We're trying to prove that cooperation between species creates something stronger than either could achieve alone. Human ships, use your maneuverability and numbers to create targeting opportunities. Australian vessels, focus your superior firepower on the largest threats. And everyone trust the hybrid connections. Let the technology work together the way our species should. The battle that followed rewrote the history of space combat. Human fighters, their pilots guided by Australian tactical computers, danced through space with precision that bordered on precognitive. Australian cruisers, their energy weapons coordinated through human fire control systems, delivered devastating barrages with an accuracy that turned the void between worlds into a symphony of controlled destruction. But the Devourers were not passive opponents. Their ships began adapting to the combined tactics, their dark hulls shifting and changing to counter each new strategy. Worse, their consumption beams designed to strip matter at the molecular level began targeting the hybrid connections, themselves seeking to sever the technological bridges that made the defense possible. They're learning to fast, Dante reported, sweat beading on his forehead as he coordinated the human fleet. Every time we adapt, they counter-adapt within minutes, because they're not just ships, Zara realized, her voice carrying across the command center. They're a hive mind, sharing information instantaneously across their entire fleet. We need to disrupt their communication network. How? Tice demanded. The technology is based on quantum entanglement. Physical distance means nothing to their coordination systems, but emotional distance might, Jackson said, a desperate plan forming in his mind. Kira, that neural stabilizer, how much do you have? Enough for one massive dose, but Jackson, that much would let me interface with their network directly, he finished. If I can get close enough to their command ship, I might be able to introduce chaos into their hive mind. Human emotions, Australian creativity, the unpredictability that comes from free will instead of collective consciousness. It's suicide. Dante said flatly, it's evolution, Jackson countered. The next step in what my parents started when they fell in love across species lines. He turned to face both Zara and Kira, seeing his decision reflected in their eyes. I need both of you for this. Zara, I need your ship to get me close to their command vessel. Kira, I need your knowledge of hybrid physiology to keep me alive long enough to complete the interface. And after, Kira asked quietly. After, we find out if love really is stronger than conquest. The next 20 minutes passed in a blur of preparation and impossible maneuvers. Zara's ship, enhanced with every defensive system the combined fleets could provide, dove through the Devourer formation toward the massive command vessel at its heart. Kira worked frantically over Jackson's prone form, injecting him with compounds that would allow his nervous system to survive direct contact with an alien hive mind. Jackson, Zara said as they approached the command ship, I need you to know what we've shared. The connection between us, it's real. It's not just programming or genetic compatibility. It's choice. I know, he replied, his consciousness already beginning to expand beyond the boundaries of his individual mind. Kira, the same goes for you. The protection, the sacrifice, the years of preparation, that's love too. Just come back to us, Kira whispered, tears streaming down her face. Both worlds need you, but we need you more. The interface began as Zara's ship made contact with the Devourer command vessel. Jackson's enhanced nervous system reached out across the quantum barriers, touching the edges of a consciousness vast beyond imagination. For a moment, he felt himself drowning in the collective hunger of a billion-year-old species driven by nothing but the need to consume. Then he began to introduce chaos. Human laughter, Australian poetry, the memory of his parents' first kiss, Kira's fierce protectiveness, Zara's patient wisdom, Daddy's determined hope, every emotion, every moment of connection he'd ever experienced, flowing into the sterile perfection of the hive mind like viruses of individuality. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Devourer ships began breaking formation, their pilots suddenly experiencing concepts like doubt, curiosity, and wonder for the first time in their species' existence. Some vessels simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by the overwhelming complexity of individual thought. Others began attacking their own fleet mates, driven by newly awakened desires for independence. But the strain on Jackson was enormous. He could feel his consciousness fragmenting, pieces of himself scattering across the quantum network. Just as he began to lose coherence entirely, he felt the distinct presences reaching for him, Zara's luminous strength and Kira's grounded determination, both of them anchoring him to himself through the power of connection. Together, the three of them held the chaos stable long enough for the combined human-Australian fleet to exploit the Devourer's confusion. When the battle finally ended, 17 enemy vessels had been destroyed, and the remaining 50 had fled back into deep space, but not before their crews had been permanently infected with the concept of individual choice. Status report, Jackson managed to whisper as consciousness slowly returned to his battered body. Both fleets intact, minimal casualties, and the Devourer threat neutralized for at least a generation, Dante replied. More importantly, the integration protocols worked flawlessly. Both species' governments have agreed to formal alliance negotiations. And us? Jackson looked between Zara and Kira, both of whom were monitoring his vital signs with equal concern. Us is complicated, Kira admitted with a tired smile. But then again, when has anything about this situation been simple? The precedent has been set, Zara added, her starlight eyes warm with possibility. Bonds between species, between individuals, between hearts, they're stronger than any weapon or any fear. The universe is vast enough for all kinds of love. As Jackson recovered in the days that followed, he discovered that the battle had changed more than just interspecies relations. The neural interface had left him permanently connected to both human and Australian technology, making him a living bridge between civilizations. But more importantly, it had shown him that the choice between different loves wasn't a choice at all, it was an expansion.